Hi and welcome to the Assignment 1 presentation for Projects and Performance. I'm Clay Evans and today I'll be discussing the Sanctuary Health Facility Construction Project and my assigned sub-project being Site Infrastructure and Enabling Works. Displayed is a brief outline of the presentation to follow. This project has eventuated due to Divine Health Services, or DHS, having inherited a 2-hectare portion of land to develop a healthcare facility in the Australian state of Queensland, into which they can relocate their existing services. DHS has completed the transfer of title and obtained approval from the Minister for Health to provide healthcare services from this facility. Displayed is a brief project overview highlighting the 8 sub-projects that will combine to deliver the overall project objectives. Displayed also is a snapshot of the design of the facility. The site currently has a vegetation coverage of 40% of the land area. A quick snapshot of the program infrastructure, which consists of 8 sub-projects, including the project I'll be discussing, that is sub-project 1, the Site Infrastructure and Enabling Works, or SB1. To note that SB1 interfaces with all other sub-projects. Identified are the remaining sub-projects and their interfaces with other sub-projects. All sub-projects will report to the centrally based Project Management Office, which has overview of the program, led by the Program Director. Consideration should be given to the central site facility and utilisation, specifically where there are services that are shared across the scopes. These shared services will be based at the central site facility, supporting efficiency across all sub-projects. The objectives of the program and how they relate to SB1. SB1 will need to establish site infrastructure and enabling works to support the establishment of the campus. SB1 will require completion well in advance of the 3-year deadline for operational readiness. Considering commissioning and hiring of staff to operate the facility are due to conclude by the end of the 3 years, the site infrastructure and enabling works will need to be completed to provide the commissioning team sufficient time to open the facility for operations. SB1 will contribute to the facility having neutral impact on the local environment by employing strategies such as retaining of cleared trees and storing of them to use as wood chips, and stockpiling of topsoil to be used as part of the landscaping, thus reducing the carbon footprint. SB1 will endeavour to not spend any of the contingency budget to support the project being delivered within budget. Sub-project 1, Site Infrastructure and Enabling Works, is responsible for development of the site-wide infrastructure and enabling works to allow the other projects to commence. This project comprises of obtaining operational work permits such as traffic management plans and council approvals, stormwater management of the site, and similar statutory approvals will be required. We'll need a site survey that's comprehensive to establish the civil works challenges involved in the site clearing and bulk earthworks. We'll need to ensure tree clearing and making up the landscaping will be ecologically neutral, and we need to add probably clearing of the site to the scope. Considering whether the trees are able to be used for furniture, landscaping and wood chipping, also to reuse any of the topsoil that we remove as part of our land clearing. The road network, we need to consider car parking. This is where the qualitative aspects of the scope come into play. There may be a single bitumen road or a double road. All of these have time and cost implications. The project team will need to ask the client as to what their qualitative performance measures would be. The car parking is where the qualitative aspects of the scope come into play. Depending on the qualitative aspects, there will be cost and time impact upon overall completion. The supplying of all the furniture and fittings, being bollards, fencing and wheel stops, we should ensure that we communicate with all other sub-projects to ascertain whether there are any synergies or efficiencies can be gained by sharing or taking over some of the scopes of those other sub-projects. Notable interfaces are with all other projects, and all bulk earthworks will need to be completed prior to other projects so they can commence any physical work on site. This project also provide a temporary power supply and temporary water supply that will be made available to other projects during construction. The KPIs for sub-project 1 and how they can support the overall KPIs are 75% of the overall man hours, to be sourced locally. As part of the procurement process, we need to implement a selection criteria that stipulates the design team must be locally based. If outsourced, the tenderer confirms local content as part of their labour force. Less than 1 in 100 hours of industrial action or protests against the man hours. During the tender award process, again, we need to include in the shortlisting stage criteria to require the tenderer to provide records of the industrial action performance on similar projects within this space. The 1 in 10 residents who reside within 10 kilometres to have knowledge of the project. We will erect signage outside of the construction zone for pedestrian vehicular traffic that can communicate the project to those residents. 10% of all man hours to be executed by apprentices or trainees. We need to specify labour resource levels during procurement phase also. And 50% of the project materials to be sourced locally. Tenderers to provide historical and current resourcing of local suppliers during procurement processes. The work breakdown structure comprises of 4 independent phases: initiation, the planning phase, execution, and the closure. We have 3 approval gates that must be completed before the next phase commences. So once the initiation phase is completed, we have arrived at approval gate 1 and then can proceed on to the planning phase. The initiation phase purpose is to identify and align stakeholder expectations and educate them on project purpose. We need to inform the stakeholders of scope and objectives and explain expectations of stakeholder participation and how they'll contribute to the overall success. The initiation phase consists of linking of the organisational governance and the project governance, including stage gate or phase reviews, identifying, escalating and resolving risks and issues, defining roles, responsibilities and authorities, processes for project knowledge management and capturing lessons learned, decision making, problem solving and escalating topics that are beyond the project manager's authority, and reviewing and approving changes to project and product changes that are beyond the authority of the project manager. We need to be defining the project scope, including defining roles, responsibilities and authorities and resources required. Also identifying and aligning stakeholders and informing them of their scope and objectives of the project. We need to also achieve board approval to proceed to the next phase being planning. It's important to remember that the needs of the project will determine the components of the project management plan and which documents are necessary to support project success. And the planning phase consists of establishing the processes that establish the overall scope, refining the objectives and developing a course of action required to attain those objectives. Also to establish the components of the project management plan and the project documents that will be used to carry out the project. Some of the components of the planning phase include a project management plan, which comprises of a management plan that describes how project requirements will be analysed, documented and managed. Components of the requirements management plan may include how the requirements activities will be planned, tracked and reported, requirements to prioritise processes, metrics that will be used and the rationale for using them. A scope management plan and developing a schedule, a stakeholder management plan, a change management plan, scope transition plans, a milestone schedule, performance measurement baselines, assumption logs, lessons learned registers, a risk register, stakeholder register and stakeholder agreements, and quality reports in which quality management plans can help define level of quality and achieve the metrics for the project scope. Project procurement strategies, whether a buy or make procurement strategy is more appropriate in the circumstances, will need to also be decided. Design documentation package or performance specifications and sustainability performance plan. The execution phase consists of the processes performed to complete the work defined in the project management plan. It also involves the coordination of resources, managing stakeholder engagements, and integrating and performing activities of the project. Managing the execution of the project can also include managing and reporting on the quality through a quality management plan, updating the scope, schedule and cost baselines, and lessons learned register, risk registers and stakeholder registers. This of course includes responding to any changes required, such as addressing quality issues and the like. Closing the project involves the formal completion of the project and includes a verification of the defined process and activities that are completed as per the project management plan. The handing over to the commissioning team is the final step in this phase. Using an example of a schedule from a similar project, we'll need to develop a schedule for this sub-project with some key steps involved that include defining project milestones. To be considered in this instance are the interdependencies of other sub-projects and how the milestones impact on each sub-project milestone. Identifying sequencing activities and estimating durations of these activities. Once start and finish dates are established, all sub-project planning teams need to meet to confirm there are no conflicts within resource calendars. Also important is understanding the total flow, being the amount of time that a scheduled activity can be delayed or extended from its early start date without delaying project completion. The development of the schedule requires the following to be considered: the resource availability and whether there are opportunities for efficiencies whilst utilising the same contractor to execute works across multiple subcontracts. An assumption is being made that procurement processes are being overseen by the program director, who will lead the combined procurement strategy. The work breakdown structure needs to have an appreciation of this sub-project and deliverables that support other sub-projects. There may be deliverables from other sub-projects, such as electrical installation, that may impact on this sub-project deliverables to install curbing or pathways across the facility. The successful adherence to their subject project schedules will impact on the commencement of sub-project 1 scheduled tasks, which will cause a flow-on effect and also impact on performance measures. To note is that sub-project 1 is not going to have continuous workflow, as the site works and landscaping will be last. Scheduling software needs to be considered as is ensuring that all sub-projects are using the same software to support streamlined information sharing. Historical information from previous similar projects should also be considered and referenced to prepare and finalise the schedule. There's a requirement to determine the scope, and I'll need to establish a project definition report and review historical examples to establish baselines. Need the monitoring and reporting tools, including meetings, and develop the schedule and the schedule management plan, and identify any synergies that can provide efficiencies. Monitoring rules such as earned value management rules or other physical measurement rules or performance measurements. For example, a schedule management plan may specify EVM techniques such as baselines, fixed formulas, percent complete, rules for establishing percentage complete, and schedule variance and schedule index used to assess the magnitude of variation to original schedule baseline. We need tools to manage the plan, progress meetings including between subcontracts, and preparing a cost plan of the program may impact on the budget contingency and escalation that may result. Project cost management includes the processes involved in planning, estimating, budgeting, managing, and controlling the costs to support completion of the project within budget. Processes involved include defining how the project costs will be estimated, managed, monitored, and controlled, developing an approximation of the monetary resources needed to complete the project work, determining a budget and controlling the costs. Inputs into managing the costs of the project include the project charter, which provides the pre-approval financial resources from which the costs are developed. It also provides a definition of what project approvals are required for escalation of budget. Historical information or lessons learned from similar projects. The Rawlinson Construction Guide is a useful resource to gather a baseline for budgeting similar projects. We also consider bringing in individuals with experience in this type of scope. They bring with them knowledge from experience from previous similar projects, cost estimating and budgeting, as well as earned value management. Once the project's underway, there is a requirement to hold regular meetings within both the sub-project team and the project stakeholders to report on any issues of time management that may impact on budget compliance. Any regularly reporting on any change management to report on changes to costs, budget, etc. If specs change, for example, windows, glass glazing costs could impact on overall costs that could cause trade-offs to remain within the budget. Documents that support maintaining control on budget compliance are cost management plans that describe how project costs will be structured into the budget, resource management plans to provide information on rates and other foreseen costs that are necessary to estimate the overall project budget and budget performance, a scope baseline, assumption logs, lesson learned registers, which can also be shared with other sub-projects to assist them in identifying issues that they may encounter, a risk register to be updated when appropriate risk responses are chosen and agreed upon during any changes to budget and key milestone assumptions. Some recommendations and assumptions. SIMOPS. So sub 1 is integral to all other project alignment, and that there is heavy influence on other projects remaining on schedule to support sub 1's successful completion on time and on budget. There's risk involved that this would impact on multiple sub-projects that have dependencies upon each other's time execution. Consideration should be given to overall project management to mitigate these risks. Without stringent monitoring of all sub-projects, a crossover of cost blowout could be considerable. As an example, whilst other projects require sub 1 to be on time and at the front end of this project, sub 1 relies upon other project completion on time at the back end of sub 1. Also procurement. It's assumed that procurement will be a centralised function to ensure similar scopes are streamlined in their execution. As highlighted previously, deliverables such as furniture and fittings could be centralised to create efficiency in timely execution, as well as providing cost savings across the overall project execution.